Okay, good evening. Apologies for no content for the last couple of days. My laptop decided to completely crash and need a brand new version of Windows 10 installing, and the hard drive decided to best final I've ever seen. And Also, I've been ill with a virus, so it's been a bit of a mixed few days. You can tell by my voice, I'm not well. I've got flu. It's fun. Um, But yes, the World Cup final, possibly the best final I've ever seen. And what is interesting, every time Argentina have won the World Cup, they've scored 3 goals in the game. So there's that, and all 3 times they've won the World Cup, they've blown a lead and had to game's been tied, and they have to find a winner, or in this case, penalty shootout. So that's interesting. Kylian Mbappe, first player to score a hat trick in the final and lose. Um, So there's that. In regards to Southgate staying on, look, I think this is on the FA extending him before the tournament, but he accepted that extension regardless of how things went, which has put the FA in a position now. Southgate's decided to continue until 2024, which I think digs the FA out of a bit of a hole. Person, um, in regards to finding a replacement. No, I haven't. I don't watch TV anymore. Really, the only time I really watch telly is sport related. And I haven't watched Sports Personality of the Year for about 15 years. Um, it's a popularity contest rather than done on actual ability and achievements. So yeah, Sports Personality of the Year is just like it's the sports versions of the BAFTAs of the Oscars. It is purely a popularity contest. And it's not what it once was in standing of sports award ceremonies. And uh, it's one of them really. In regards to obviously the last live stream was on Saturday. My friend phoned me up. His kids have been ill. He's had to move at short notice, and he invited me over to his new flat for a little bit. And I've caught something off his kids. Basically, they've had scarlet fever and flu, and I've caught a virus off them, and now I'm not feeling well. Ronnie O'Sullivan, Beth Mead, Ben Stokes, Eve Muirhead, and 2 others. Oh, by the way, it's 2 others. Look, Ronnie O'Sullivan will probably get a lifetime achievement award for his services to snooker. Um, um, but Ben Stokes, look, England have had a bit of a turnaround under Brendan McCullum. Big deal. Yay. It wasn't hard to be a better captain than Joe Root. Joe Root has got the personality of a stone. Nice guy that Joe Root is. He's not ruthless enough. Ben Stokes is more of a colourful larrikin kind of figure. And I'm not a big fan of Ben Stokes personally, but there you go. Um, Beth Mead was possibly the best player at the women's Euros this summer. Eve Muirhead, she's had a very, very good career in her chosen something from those 4. Do I ever watch award shows like the Oscars and Golden Globes? No, I have dignity and I have a soul. See that players that sign up for the LA Golf will be allowed to play the Masters. Look, the Augusta Masters, I think it's Augusta that allows the selection and qualification, not PGA, because you've got players from the various global tours playing there. So the LIV Golf is very similar to what happened in football a year ago with the European Super League, a challenge to the established order by a new order, and ultimately, I think the LIV Golf and the PGA will have to reform itself, and the LIV Golf will fail. Um, that's my opinion on that. Um, the interesting team of the year and coach of the year. Yeah, I think that's an interesting subcategory. There's some great coaches out there, some great teams out there, and it'll be interesting to see how that all balances out. Our most underrated rugby player right now, in my opinion, I don't watch enough club and international rugby union to really have a fair assessment on that one. That's an interesting one, but I think Marcus Smith is developing. Well, was had shown flashes for England. There are some good players out there. There's some overrated players out there. What about the most underrated any sport off the top of my head? Well, there's a fair few. I think there are a fair few players in a multitude of sports. Well, there's a fair few. I think there are a fair few players in a multitude of sports that are underrated because either they play for an unfashionable team or the team they play on isn't as high quality or as successful as some of the rival teams that um, uh, players play on. I think a lot of players are overrated, um, and in that regard, top of my head, I can't really think of any right now. I think there are some criminally underrated players out there, but I think it's more to do with the team you play for rather than your ability as a player. That's the same for all sports. You can be a superstar player playing on an average side, or you could be an average player playing on a class side and get overrated. I think it's a better answer to that one. Yes, I don't know what's going on with Worcester. I believe Worcester will I think also be playing in the championship next season, which then causes structural problems for all the leagues. But this is what happens when you ring fence. So the best rugby union at club level is a shambles. And I think Solihull Moors would be getting some kind of financial incentive out of that, sharing gate receipts. I would have thought, allowing the Wasps to destroy their playing surface on a weekly basis. So they'll be getting some financial compensation out of that, which will boost Solihull Moors' coffers for a push back to the for a push to the football league. Yeah, Borthwick and Sinfield. Look, Sinfield did a great job at, at Leeds Rhinos. Really did. Now Sinfield as a player, an outstanding leader of men, not the best player out there, no, not by a long shot, but as a solid rugby league player, yes. It's very interesting. A lot of defence coaches in rugby union come from a league background. That's a very interesting point. And Steve Borthwick, the RFU, much like the English FA, have decided to go back to homegrown coaching talent. The overseas experiment had mixed results with Eddie Jones. I think they should have got rid of Eddie Jones in 2021, personally. Midway through the World Cup cycle, not 9 months out. I think that's a mistake on the RFU's part to keep Eddie Jones in place as long as they did. I think they've left it too late in the World Cup cycle to make the change. Uh, we'll have to see how Sinfield does. People are calling the World Cup final the best game ever to take place in sport. I wouldn't go that far. It's the best World Cup final there's ever been, but it's not the best game that's ever been. I think a lot of ice hockey fans would think the Miracle on Ice might be the best game. Um, I think there was a lot of swings and roundabouts as the game went on. It became more intense and more chaotic. Um, on a defensive point of view, if you're looking at it very analytically, it was a shocking game. But Argentina, their game management in this tournament has been shocking. It actually has. Um, they were aided the fact that the French didn't turn up for 70 minutes, 80 minutes, and were poor. But Argentina's game management throughout the tournament has been not good enough. They've blown several leads and they lost the opening game to Saudi Arabia. So make of that what you will. But after that, what back to Coventry? The Wasps, you never know where they go next. Yeah, Wasps are going to face an issue where they need stability and moving away from their historical player and fan base, where the players traditionally came from, the fans traditionally came from, has definitely caused a lot of stability issues. And then there's the finances on top of that. Um, they overextended themselves with a stadium that's been nothing short of a money pit since a planning application was granted all those years ago to Coventry City. That stadium has caused Coventry City to go bust. So there's that. But much like the London Broncos in rugby league, they've never had a permanent home ground to call the Broncos home ground. They've moved around Greater London for 40 years. Um, and that's impacted their ability to grow um, the rugby league brand to a certain extent and stabilise themselves, which has led to the London Broncos in rugby league being a problem. I think Wasps is going to have this stability issue. I think long term. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. Obviously, there's going to be an impact for Coventry City as well with the stadium issue. So we'll see what happens. What would I prefer, homegrown talent or overseas talent? Coaching, the best possible. But when you are going with that overseas coach, it does help if they coached in the domestic system that they have gone into the international setup coaching in. Um, and I think that's where Wayne Bennett went wrong with Great Britain and England. He had never coached domestically in the Super League, whereas other Australian coaches and Kiwi coaches had. Coached domestically in the Super League, whereas other Australian coaches and Kiwi coaches had. And definitely got some things wrong there. In regards to Eddie Jones, he had never coached club level in the UK or England, and I don't know how much of an impact that actually has on rugby union personally. But uh, it what happens next? Where does Eddie Jones go next? Where does he end up? Does he end up going? Because there's been rumours linking Eddie Jones to a rugby league gig for quite some time, and now he's available. Will a rugby league, NRL club, or national side sign him up to get him involved? Um, there's been rumours linking Eddie Jones to a rugby league job for a couple of seasons now. So we'll see what happens there. We might actually be able to make money out of the Coventry Building Society Arena. That stadium has been a money pit for 20 years. It's led Coventry City to go basically out of business. It's caused the same issues for Wasps. We'll see what happens with that long term. It all depends on the lease agreement they have with Coventry City in the end, because Coventry City could be without a stadium as of next season. Although Mike Ashley's group says they want to keep Coventry City there, they've made changes to terms and agreements that Coventry City signed with Wasps, who did own the stadium until recently. And they've changed the contract, or they're planning to change the contract, which is leaving Coventry City high and dry, really. Now, there has been plans for a while that Coventry City would have another stadium built at some point, sharing with Coventry Rugby Club, a smaller stadium. So the long-term future of the Coventry Building Society Arena, it might end up becoming one of those white elephants where it's been a money pit and it doesn't fulfill its life cycle. Um, you see a lot of that in the US and Canada with stadiums that don't get occupied for very long. You've seen it in Brazil with the Olympics and the World Cup. There's a lot of those stadiums that are not used anymore, the Olympics in Athens. So it becomes a white elephant. I don't know, quite honestly, what's going to happen there. What is the age requirement for the NHL Calder again? I think it's 25 or younger. And to be eligible, you can play, I think, 9 games in your first season and still be eligible. To be classed as a rookie the following season. Anytime an international gold medal game goes into a shootout in hockey, I don't even care who wins at that point because that's how bullshit that is. I'm curious if you feel the same way. No, if you've got to that point, it shows there's a reason why the two best sides have reached that point. So there you go. Coventry just doesn't need a stadium that big. Well, Highfield Road wasn't much smaller than what is the Rico now. I think it was a mistake not trying to, build in place and repair and extend on what was already in place in Coventry. Um, I think though it is a white elephant. It's been nothing short of a money pit since it's been in existence. It's been nothing short of a controversial um, uh, situation for its entire existence. Two sports teams have gone out of business, well, basically gone out of business because of the stadium. So then, what does rugby league come up with an expansion team and call them Coventry Chieftains or something, and whack them there? For example, do you try and entice Wasps to come back, even though they're traditionally a London-based club? You know, because Coventry City, the football club, right now, are not in a great position in the Championship, and they're not in a great financial position. So there is that. Kaprizov won the Calder over Stutzel. That's the rules they have in place because you can have overages who play in the Canadian hockey, you know, junior league system, who get drafted when they're 21, and then you get undrafted players or late draft picks from Europe who then come over later into their professional careers, or some of them have actually already been professionals in Europe who haven't played juniors in North America, and they have their first full professional season in their early 20s. It's the rules that are currently in place. I I think to be culture eligible, I think you've got to be 18 or 19 person would be a better solution to the problem, but it is what it is. That's the rules the NHL has in place for that particular award, individual award for a player. And they've changed the draft rules, and they've changed overage drafts and redrafts, and they've changed entry level contracts and bridge contracts. That they constantly evolve the rules regarding players and how you become eligible for awards and what the criteria are. And they'll probably change those criteria in time again. What stadiums would I like to go to in the World Cup in 4 years' time? I'd have to relook at my stadium list video that I did and have a look at some of the stadiums that have been provisionally selected to be host stadiums. I mean, that list can and will probably change. In all honesty, admittedly not as bad um, as Wasps and Worcester, but there's a possibility after Christmas that more teams do end up in the same situation. The domestic game is not as healthy as the RFU and Premiership Rugby would care to admit, and this comes down to weak governance, very weak governance, and Wasps have made some terrible commercial decisions. Worcester have lived beyond their means to try and stay competitive, and they haven't hit that next level. But Wasps' move cost them more money than they realised, and it cost them a lot of fans. And I don't think they've ever sold out the Coventry Building Society Arena. Then they purchased the stadium off Sisu, and then it's become nothing short of a money pit, which has harmed them. But Wasps' money issues were well known before COVID, that they were having financial issues, that they were kicking the can down the road for as long as possible, trying to defer payments. And there was concern about the state of Wasps' finances 5 years ago. That some of the decisions taken after they moved to Coventry were going to have long-term impacts. That if there was a sudden drop in revenues for the league, which there was because of COVID, they wouldn't be able to pay back the money that they borrowed or their debts, and it exposed them. Whereas Worcester, COVID did for them. But rugby union at club level outside of France is in a financial mess. It's facts. It's this, and we go, and I keep harking back to the World Rugby election where Augustine Pichot was standing against Bill Beaumont, and his platform was we need to share the wealth more evenly, and a better finance model for the domestic games and the international game. And World Rugby went with Bill Beaumont, so you got more of the same of what we already had, and then the Pichot put forward that were blatantly ignored even though they were taking under advice. So there is that. The amount of lower league games, weather possibly. Hang on one second. We've had a lot of bad weather, and over here in the UK, over the last 2 weeks, we've had a lot of snow. We've had sub-zero temperatures at below -10 in some places Celsius. Don't know what that is in Fahrenheit for Americans. Yeah, we've had a lot of bad weather. So this time last week, it was in the mornings when I was waking up, it was -8 Celsius, and there was still ice and snow on the ground. And our warmest temperatures this time last week were -2 Celsius, where I live in the country. And then over the weekend, we've had torrential rain. All that ice is melted, so we've got flood warnings. So pitches have gone from being frozen to being waterlogged in the space of 24 hours. Um, and with the World Cup being on, and until last week, the last week of the World Cup, the Championship had a suspended season as well. And as the Championship was less impacted by the World Cup for players going over to play, they resumed play a week and a half ago. The Premier League resumes on Boxing Day. Um, Horrific. The last 2 weeks, we've had sub-zero temperatures, and then we've had this massive temperature rise, and then we've had really heavy rain, and we're expected to have heavy rain for the next strong winds for the next week or so, and then the temperatures drop again, and then we have a chance of snow going from Boxing Day into the New Year. So obviously, you want to move to the AJ Bell. Again, stadium sharing with different sports where like multiple teams share the same facility is not unusual. It's rare, but not unusual, and it's a great way to pool resources. I'm surprised more sports teams don't do this, where they, as I say, teams work together in different sports to share facilities as a cost-effective measure. I think we're going to see more professional sports teams do this between like your footballs, your rugby unions, your rugby leagues. They do it a lot in Australia as well with AFL and NRL and A League teams are sharing facilities. We've seen it. We see it a lot with sharing facilities with multiple sports teams. Sometimes teams in the same sport but maybe different leagues or whatever will share a facility, like 1860 Munich and Bayern Munich in Germany, even though they're in different tiers of the Bundesliga. Um, but I think ground sharing the AJ Bell with Sale Sharks is Sale Sharks is not a bad shout. On Boxing Day, my local club Hertford Town will be at home against Ware FC. These guys. So, look, I mean, the fact that I do think lower league and non-league football in this country gets massively overlooked in the media. There is the obsession with the Big Six. Even though Tottenham only won one trophy in my lifetime, but there is that obsession with the Big Six, which I think has a negative impact on the majority of clubs within the professional footballing system in this country. As I say, the media obsession with Manchester United, every media outlet will have a specific Man United correspondent. Whereas, let's say, a club in London, there'll be the South East London correspondent who will go to that club if there's a transfer or a sacking or an injury. Manchester United has their own dedicated reporter from every single newspaper and TV station has a dedicated Man United reporter. Um, okay, so you've got the Red Devils, Sale, and possibly Salford City. Can that stadium, with the infrastructure that stadium has, house three professional sports teams in three different sports? Is that possible? Can the pitch hold up with the abuse? And is there enough infrastructure in place for that? While it may be very cost effective for the three clubs involved, where they're pooling resources together, we'll see what happens. I don't think they can under FA rules. They can't. Once the AJ Bell is classed as their home stadium, it has to be their home stadium for the entire season. So fixturing is going to be interesting. Fixturing will be interesting in regards to cup games and if there's a clash with Sale and Salford and when the Red Devil and then obviously the rugby league season as well. All three sports overlap for parts of the year. So fixturing could be very interesting and match day turnarounds with the relaying of the lines, the abuse the pitch will receive. The pitch will be destroyed. looking at the weather right now, if football and rugby union was to use the pitch right now, it would be a mud bath by the time the rugby league season starts in February till October. Um, and then the rugby union football lasts until May, and then comes back in August, September. So the pitch will have a 365-day a year use, pretty much. Um, and while it may be cost effective for the three teams involved, and that pitch will be annihilated. It's the best way to look at it. Absolutely annihilated. But we've seen it with other sports and in other countries and even in this country sharing of facilities. Um, we have done for some time. It's not unusual. It is rare, but not unusual. And I can see a trend with more sports teams possibly doing this long term to pool resources and save on cost. I think it will be a very good cost saving measure, a good financial measure, especially in the economic situation we find ourselves in. Oh yeah, the Oakland Coliseum. Yeah, the Oakland Coliseum must be the worst stadium in North America. The Oakland Coliseum must be the worst stadium in North America. um, yeah, the Oakland Coliseum has been a bit of a white elephant for some time. It is why the Raiders moved to Vegas. Was the state of the facility, and getting the cost of a replacement in the Bay Area was a sticking point for many years. The fact that the Raiders have moved for the third time now, the third relocation of that team, while it's the American model, um, tells you all you need to know about the stability of the organisation as well. But the Oakland Coliseum has been nothing short of a scandal for 20, 30 years. It's in a poor state of repair. Um, So there is that. Peru or USA will host the Copa America in 2024 after Ecuador declined to host. That's an interesting one. Ecuador's got a lot of social issues right now, political issues right now. So it'll be interesting to see who gets selected to be the host of that tournament. I think the US might actually get it just as a trial run for the World Cup 2 years after. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Um, and we'll see if it's Peru or the US will be the host. But I think the US might be granted it as a good test run for the World Cup in 2026. We'll have to see. Obviously, the 2026 World Cup will be co-hosted by the US, and then not long after that, you've got both the women's and men's rugby union World Cups hosted by the US. So I think it'd be a really good test event to have in the run up to those tournaments that are coming in the next decade. Um, the sporting infrastructure is in place. It's now getting the practice in of hosting a major international tournament. Um, Individual cities and stadiums are used to hosting large events. It's now about um, it's all about uh, coordinating all the stadiums and cities together in a coordinated fashion, hosting a big event. Now, obviously, the US did it in '94, but a lot's changed in that time. Uh, with travel being quicker, social media and satellite media being more effective. So we'll see what happens. If Messi comes to the MLS soon, it will make my sales drop so much. Well, any kind. I mean, David Beckham helped save the MLS at the time when he went there to LA Galaxy. Obviously, Ibrahimovic had a massive impact when he went, and were very marketable assets, which definitely assisted the growth of the league. And now, obviously, Beckham is involved with owning a team and Wayne Rooney's coaching a team. So there's definitely something to be said um, in that regard when you get that marketable asset that makes the sales job easier. The Athletics Diamond League will be at the London Stadium this summer, but should London renovate the Crystal Palace National Sports Stadium rather than having it go at the London Stadium? There's a reason why the Olympic legacy of the London Stadium it was kept as a multi-purpose facility. Absolutely, the Crystal Palace Athletic Stadium should definitely have some investment. Where are you going to find the money from? Who will foot the bill for it? Will it be private investment? Will it be taxpayer money? Who fits the bill for that reinvestment? Again, partly because 3 of the CONCACAF nations will not be qualifying for the World Cup as they're co-hosting. I think that's very, very important that these teams have competitive matches in the next. These teams have competitive matches in the next few years in the build-up to the World Cup. So I think that is definitely a good thing. I think it benefits all parties and benefits the game. I think that's a very, very good shout. I mean, they're in discussions; it's not confirmed, obviously, but it's definitely something that could benefit those nations that will miss out on some competitive internationals, especially the US and Canada and Mexico, because they won't qualify for the next World Cup because they're hosting it. So that's a definite positive move should it come to pass, and whether expanding the Copa America to include both North and South America and the Caribbean and Central America may be a good thing long term. Maybe combining CONCACAF and CONMEBOL may also, an America's qualification group, may be a thing that happens going forward. We shall see. Also, talk about international football. FIFA have obviously said that they're going to change the format of the Club World Cup to a 32-team tournament. How they're going to fit that into the club calendar, I don't know. And Infantino has suggested a 3-year World Cup cycle rather than 4. That's interesting. That is the issue. Is an ideal world, the Crystal Palace National Sports Centre would be renovated not just for athletic stadium but also an indoor arena. But who pays for that? Who does foot the bill? Who puts forward the money? You've got to look at Wembley. Taxpayer money was involved in that, although not wholly. The London City Stadium or the London Stadium, the former Olympic Stadium. I think a fair bit of that was private equity, but there was also a fair chunk of taxpayer money involved in that. I think the Birmingham Athletic Stadium for the Commonwealth Games, I think there's a fair bit of private investment in that, but also a lot of taxpayer money went into that. I think the Glasgow Commonwealth Games, taxpayer money went into that and private investment. That's same with Manchester. And then obviously the Man City group comes along and changes and renovations are made to the stadium to what is now the Etihad with private money. But whenever we look at sports facilities, how much is paid for by private money and how much is paid for by government or taxpayer money? So it'll be interesting who pays for it. For me, it would be good for you. So that's going to play them. Yeah, that's what I think, and also for those other nations who miss out on those games against those 3 for competitive internationals because of the change to qualification for the World Cup. It's also interesting. So it does have a dual benefit, both for the Copa America as a tour and interest in the tournament, and it's also beneficial for the North American teams because of their restructured qualifying. But there we go. We'll have to see what plays out. I love having that snotty nose. Proposal put forward, which I don't think comes to pass. In regards to the World Cup cycle, FIFA is risking, really pissing off your way from CONMEBOL, which is where your World Cup winners come from all the time. And then I think FIFA itself is a lot of taxpayer money is going into funding that stadium build. long overdue, long overdue. But again, in the most capitalist country in the world, what is very, very interesting is these wealthy billionaires expect the average American worker to pay for their vanity projects, which is really interesting. Usually, when there's an investment, there's a Commonwealth Games or something like that. Maybe London needs a Commonwealth. I didn't watch any of the Commonwealth Games this year, which I find really interesting. I didn't watch any of the Commonwealth Games this year. So that which Commonwealth Games for me, I've watched less in recent years than I used to. Or the Winter Olympics. So some of these multinational, um, that's not to say they're not, worthwhile as sporting events and not worth their place within the sporting calendar and the sporting side. Now, obviously, talk about the Qatar World Cup and was it the best World Cup ever, and it's generated the most revenue, blah 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 blah. So there is that, and so that's a very interesting subplot. Is you could argue has to do with so there is that. You also have the punishments and the culture difference, but but um, there were some positives to come out about a major international sporting event of that kind of kind. But then again, it's a French-speaking city, and the Commonwealth is predominantly English or former British Empire. Uh,